Kathmandu, Nepal was the starting point. In mid-April, Hall and the Harrises joined up with a large commercial climbing expedition and drove to Everest Base Camp in Tibet, the staging area for the 6-week assault on the mountain. At the same time, on the same route, a 45-year-old American named Dan Mazur was leading a much smaller expedition of his own. Mazur is one of America's most successful high-altitude climbers. He reached the summit of Everest in 1991. Now, he's a professional guide. Though Mazur and Hall were on parallel courses, they never met. Climbing Everest takes weeks. Mountaineers like Mazur and Hall gradually ascend to camps at ever higher altitudes, trying to adapt their bodies to avoid altitude sickness before making the final push to the summit. A documentary filmmaker went along with Hall's group. Hall gave expert commentary along the way. But other climbers like Dan Mazur were still on track. And so were 3 other members of Hall's expedition, including Hall himself. He still had a chance to fulfill his dream. Was how quickly this push to the summit would turn deadly. Hall, at age 50, was ready to go. He started for the summit around midnight on May 25th. Just before he left, he called his wife Barbara on a satellite phone.
He sounded very lucid. He sounded full of anticipation, full of hope and strength.
Up farther down the mountain, American guide Dan Mazur was preparing his clients for their push to the summit. The weather was clear, but he knew how quickly that could change on Everest. Everest does not tolerate bad decisions. The realm above 26,000 feet is called the death zone. So cold and so deprived of oxygen, it's not compatible with human life. The mountain is dotted with corpses up there. Climbers actually have to step over some of them on the way up. Everyone on Hall's team had also heard about David Sharp, passed over by several groups of climbers who deemed him too far gone to save.
There was this Englishman who was hiding under a rock, and 30 members of various parties passed him by and none did anything to help him. Our expedition 50 years ago would never have considered leaving a man like that. We were very much aware of our responsibilities to look after any person on the mountain who was in distress. I think the priority of the climbers who did not stop to help David Sharp was to get to the top, and the welfare of a member of an expedition was very secondary. There is no doubt at all that there's been a lowering of standards in recent years with the commercialisation on Everest. And as a consequence, people are being neglected and are dying. In our day, there's no doubt at all that the responsibility of looking after people who are in danger or in distress was far more important than getting to the summit.
Hall was climbing with a large commercial expedition. Everyone on the summit push had been together for weeks and knew each other well. The final ascent is marked by 3 technical sections, commonly called steps. At sea level, they'd just be moderate rock climbs. But up in the death zone, where the lack of oxygen saps your strength and may impair your judgment, the 3 steps can cost you the summit or your life. Hall and his Sherpas easily cleared the 3 steps. In fact, Lincoln Hall and his Sherpas did reach the summit at about 9 a.m. on May 25th. Back at base camp, his team celebrated. But just minutes later, the news from the mountain turned grim. A member of Hall's team, the visually impaired climber Thomas Weber, had fallen behind. He never reached the summit, and now his guide radioed that Weber was having a crisis.
Stay down in snow for more than 5 minutes. I need no color in his face. I need no breathing.
It was a terrible scene. Weber suddenly turned to his guide and said, "I'm dying." Then he collapsed.
I'm dead. Thomas died.
Thomas died? Oh, for f***'s sake.
So now you're sure he is dead? Oh, yes.
Just like that, a member of Lincoln Hall's team, Thomas Weber, became another body on Everest. And the news suddenly got even worse.
Is very bad, and if it's possible, send one Sherpa up to help Lincoln, because he is near the dead also, and take one Sherpa.
In fact, they did send another Sherpa, but that didn't make any difference. Lincoln was stuck at 28,000 feet. The Harrises were 10,000 feet below at base camp, helpless to do anything but plead with him.
You've just got to get down, mate. It's Richard. Christopher and I, Mike, are all waiting here for you, okay? And Dorothy and Dylan and Barbara, they're all worried about you. So you just give it your best and keep coming down so you can talk to them, mate.
But Lincoln wouldn't budge. The Sherpas reported that he was irrational. He wanted to lie down and go to sleep, a life-threatening move. The Sherpas couldn't carry him. They were too weak themselves from the lack of oxygen. Crucial hours passed.
Lincoln is still not moving, and the two Sherpas that are with him are beginning to suffer the same problems that Lincoln is suffering, which means that the Sherpas also are now needing rescuing.
It was 7 p.m. The Sherpas had spent 9 hours trying to talk Lincoln down the mountain. That meant a total of 19 hours exposed in the death zone. The expedition leader knew the Sherpas were in danger of dying too.
It's very difficult for me, but Lincoln doesn't move.
We understand that, Alex, and I think Lincoln will not want Sherpas to die due to what's happened to him, over.
Lincoln Hall was now lying in the snow, unconscious. The Sherpas were running out of oxygen. No helicopter could fly high enough to reach them. There was only one choice left.
It's bad enough that if Lincoln is going to go, but these Sherpas, obviously, if they can't do more for Lincoln, must leave the location and come down over.
The Sherpas wanted to have no doubt, so they poked Lincoln in the eyeball. No response. At 7:20 p.m., they declared him dead.
Okay. Now I will say Sherpas, leave Lincoln.
As night fell, the Sherpas collected Lincoln Hall's backpack, extra oxygen, food, and water, and left him at 28,000 feet. In Australia, there was no call from Lincoln. She got another call instead.
I got a message from the wife of another member of the expedition to say that, in fact, he was in difficulty and still quite close to the summit. And then that's when I really felt my heart sink.
Another corpse, just a stone's throw from the body of visually impaired climber Thomas Weber. Mount Everest, the temperature was 15 below zero and falling by the minute. Lincoln Hall, father, husband, mountaineer, was lost to the frigid night. Or so everyone thought. Mazur might have expected to find Lincoln Hall's body at any moment. He'd been climbing since midnight with 2 clients and a Sherpa, aiming to summit Everest mid-morning. Now, at 7:30, the summit was just 2 hours away.
We were in the clear, and we all felt good, and we felt so lucky. I mean, the summit was just above us, and we knew we were going there.
But before they reached the summit, a flash of color caught Dan's eye.
And I saw in the distance a little bit of yellow fabric on the ridge top. And I thought, oh, what is that, a tent or something? And then I got a little closer, and I could see that it was a person.
And as Dan approached, the scene that unfolded before him was just plain weird.
He had his jacket unzipped, and his arms were out of the sleeves of the jacket. So you could see his chest bare, and he looked very distressed. And then he saw me, almost as if I think he thought I was part of maybe a dream that he was having.
Did you think anyone could be up there in those conditions and still be alive?
I have never seen anything like that before. The thing that struck me was that how he was holding his hands up and he had no gloves on. You could see like his fingers had frozen and they were sort of a waxy yellow, and then below that it looked like normal skin, and he was holding up his hands like this and sort of looking around. I was blown away.
Unbelievably, the stranger spoke to him.
He said, I imagine you're surprised to see me here. Because I probably had a look on my face of, total shock with my jaw down, And I said, can you tell me your name? And then he was almost sort of pleased and surprised sounding, and he said, yes, I know my name. And then he said, my name is Lincon Hall.
Lincon Hall? Could it really be that the same man who'd been declared dead more than 12 hours ago was alive? Dan Mazur snapped some pictures, even as he began to help Hall.
And I said, let's get your gloves on, let's get your hat on, let's get your coat on, let's get some oxygen on you.
Dan quickly understood Lincon had been there all night long. It was a miracle Hall was alive. But Dan knew he didn't have much more time left.
We gave him a lot of water, we gave him some candy bars, some Snickers bars, and we started trying to get him to put his gloves on. I said, okay, hold out your hand, Lincon, and he put his glove on, put his other glove on. Okay, we found his hat, put your hat on.
But despite the biting -20-degree temperature, Hall resisted Dan's efforts like an unruly child.
And then he started taking his gloves off. He started taking his hat off and unzipping his coat. And I was saying, no, it's really cold out here. Why don't you keep those gloves on? It looks like your hands are frozen. Why don't you keep your hat on? Because he was also shivering really badly.
Mazur realized Hall was hallucinating.
He thought he was on a boat ride. He kept saying, I'm surprised you guys are on this boat ride with me.
And they were surprised that Lincon was trying to get out of his imaginary boat. In reality, he was perched on a high ridge and in danger of falling to his death.
You got to remember, he's on a platform like this with 8,000 feet on this side and 6,000 feet on this side, and he's kind of like leaning back, and he has his arms hanging down the top of this 8,000-foot cliff, and he was very unstable.
Just then, 2 more climbers making their push for the summit approached. Dan hailed them. What followed was one of those moments on Everest that defines who you are and what you believe.
He kind of looked away, and he said, I don't speak English. And he kept going. Okay, doesn't speak English. I don't know. And his partner came along, and I said, good morning, and he said hi, and he kept going.
Dan discovered later that both climbers did speak English. It was reminiscent of what had happened to the British climber David Sharp, who'd been left to die on Everest 10 days before. Lucky for Lincon Hall, Dan Mazur was there. Dan and the 2 climbers he was guiding tied the unsteady Hall into their own climbing rope for safety. They radioed to Hall's team at base camp, but no one there was expecting news about Hall.
Finally, they got someone who would talk on the radio, and the first thing he said to me on the radio was, you mean he's still alive? And I said, yeah, he's alive, he's talking, he's moving around, and he needs a rescue, and we need to have you guys come up here right away.
At that moment, 3 men's dreams of reaching the summit died, so that Lincon Hall could live. They stayed for 4 hours, watching over him until the rescue team arrived. It took Hall 11 hours to stumble 2 miles to safety at a camp lower on the mountain. Lincon Hall had been left for dead just below the summit of Everest, but because of the choice 3 climbers made, he lived to tell the tale. But he lived to tell us his story, his hands and right foot still bandaged due to severe frostbite, his voice still hoarse from the bitter cold.
Why did you live? Well, I guess that's a good question. So easy to die in that sort of situation. I knew that because I know people who've died that way. My first memory of that meeting was Dan grabbing me and telling me to sit down.